Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back. And if you are just tuning in with me for the very first time, it's so nice to meet you. And I'm really glad you're here with me today. I am your host, Heather Carey, nutritionist, chef, mom, and a woman who has been around the block with food. I want to open up about real food in relation to health, weight, and our bodies so you can make peace with what you eat. Hey, everybody. If you are questioning your drinking and how much you drink and whether or not you should give it up, I want you to take a listen to today's podcast because I had a really enlightening conversation with meditation teacher, mentor, and well-being coach Maria Mays, who has a slightly different approach to mindful drinking. She teaches courses and classes all around this concept of slowing down, using all your senses when you are drinking a glass of wine and just taking it all in. Maria's approach to drinking and alcohol consumption is likely something that you are not used to hearing. If you question your drinking or think maybe it's too much, take a listen to today's interview. You'll definitely learn a lot. Hey, everybody, and welcome back. Today, I am with Maria Mays, and as a meditation teacher, mentor, and well-being coach, Maria serves as a conduit for inner peace. She founded Take 5, a company with a mission of helping time-strapped professionals liberate themselves from anxiety and the effects of chronic stress. Maria has a specialty in mental wellness in the workplace and brings expert and professional instruction in meditation, breathwork, holistic health, and mindfulness practices to different companies and offices. And in addition to all her credentials, and the reason I was eager to talk with Maria today is because in addition to her goals towards inner peace and calm, Maria also has over 10 years experience working in the wine industry and teaches mindful wine tasting and drinking. This was so intriguing to me since so many people drink alcohol. And I know from the experience of many of my clients that there can be a secret struggle behind it. Mindfulness, I imagine, around drinking could be the answer to that. Hi, Maria, and welcome. And I wanted to just start by saying that I stopped drinking over 5 years ago because I could no longer ignore all I knew about the health detriments of alcohol. And there's, truth to the fact that there's no amount of alcohol that's really good for you. I know Canada even set a standard of no more than 2 drinks per week now. And it sounds like the United States might eventually get to that place as well. So I really had a wake-up call for myself when it came to realizing the habit that I had been creating for myself. I mean, everything was linked to that glass of wine. It was the end of the week. It was the end of a work day. I was bored. I was meeting friends. I was hanging out with my husband. I mean, just everything, the habit that, just centered around it was really eye-opening to me. So I'm curious to hear your story around wine and drinking and why you believe that mindfulness could be the answer to someone who might question how much they drink.
Well, thank you, Heather. Thank you for the intro. And that's a great way to get us started in terms of the journey of my own with alcohol. And I'm grateful to your listeners to give us this time in their day as well. So my journey was definitely a long one to become a mindful drinker. And so I wasn't always mindful. I would say that although, looking back at childhood, even just having awareness of my father, for example, having a beer after work or, a cocktail after work as a way to kind of end the day, take the edge off. Right. And so that was something that I observed, in my youth, but didn't really think about it until recently as I started reflecting on my own journey. And then in my adolescence, it became as I explored as many of us do when we're teenagers, I found that it could take the edge off my anxiety. Even though we know that alcohol actually will create more anxiety in the human body, for that minute or two, or that hour or two, or however long you actually receive the benefit of the depressing of the system, depressing of the nervous system to allow you to be more calm, I found that that was a way where I could feel more comfortable in my own skin in social environments. And so that's kind of how I started to dabble. I was like, this is, you know, this is something that works to help me feel a little bit more um, belonging at the time. And so then fast forward to, I would say probably my first job out of college. And so I was working for, Fortune 500, and it was very much a go, 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 fast, pressure filled environment. And what I found is, well, first of all, most people were 10 to 30 years my senior that I was working with. But I found that that's really where the deal got done. It was at the cocktail table. It was at happy hour. It wasn't necessarily in the meeting that you had prior to that. So it became kind of an indoctrinated thing, I think, culturally based on I'm going to say the corporate lifestyle. And then also just having already found it as a means to self-medicate. And so fast forward several decades, I found myself in my early 30s in a unconscious habit loop of, as you kind of mentioned or painted a picture, coming home after a long day, heading to the wine fridge, pouring myself a glass of wine, going to the pantry, grabbing a bag of chips, eating some chips while I'm drinking my wine, trying to figure out what the heck I'm going to make for dinner. And I think it's something that a lot of us fall into. And so there's certainly been a lot of gaps within there where I partied, right? And there also were times where I didn't drink. And so, but there was that time in my 30s where it really became an unconscious habit loop, or what we would call a karma cycle of having an action, right? Like in this case, me pouring a glass of wine and sipping it, that creating a memory right in me. Oh, I had this experience. I'm feeling a little bit more chill. I'm not getting as anxious about, the fact that the house is a mess or the kids are doing this, or, whatever the day stresses, right? And then that created a memory in my brain and a desire then to do it again. And so we find ourselves falling into these unconscious habit loops where even if it wasn't a bottle a night, it was just a glass of wine at night, at times maybe two, it was still unconscious in that there was nothing intentional about my actions. And, there's some good, the bad, and the ugly along the way there. But I would say that it wasn't until I'd stepped away from alcohol for a bit in my late 30s and early 40s. And then as I developed a really consistent meditation practice, as I found that self-love that I've been missing for most of my life, and as I became much more self-aware and much more self-compassionate, at that point, I was able to really look at it as an entirely different experience. And so I'd been pouring in you mentioned I'd been in the wine industry 10 years on as a result of coming out of a deep period of grief and loss and a nervous breakdown as a result of it, because I didn't take care of myself. I was too busy taking care of everybody else around me to even consider, how dare I take time for myself when I've got all these people to care for type mentality. And so I hit a wall and I had a full breakdown. And in coming out of that, as I was starting to come back to being ready to go back to work and being ready to be out in the world again, I wasn't quite ready to go back to the software career that I had known since the start of my career. Long story short, I started pouring in a little tasting room in a boutique winery on the road to Yosemite. And I always had this love for the tasting experience because it was a slower process, because it was typically paired with food, because there was just there are so many memories even in my early childhood. As I looked to, we would always go to Napa when people would visit. I'd watch my parents. At that age, I couldn't drink, right? But I would see, someone would come out from Minnesota where we moved from, and then we would show them, Napa, Yosemite, San Francisco, all the things, right? And so I noticed, I think subconsciously, a little bit of slowing down and just a very joyful environment. And so I always had this bee in my bonnet that I wanted to pour wine in the tasting room after I retired. And so at that point, when I was getting myself well, I decided, why wait? Let me start here. And it really helped me bring myself back to then diving back into the software world, etc. But as I became deeper into meditation and started sharing meditation with others, becoming certified and, starting to teach others, I really found so many similarities in the tasting process, the 5 S's that you learn when you're in the wine industry, right? Of tasting, and then the mindfulness process within the Ayurvedic lifestyle that I teach. And so I decided to combine the two because it's really, I didn't seek to become that myself, but that was my journey. Was after I became dedicated with my practice, after I found that self-love, which I found through my practice. And after I was able to step into just full presence and awareness with my behavior, then I was able to taste really mindfully. And so I thought, here's an opportunity to develop, to share this with others. And so it kind of happened as a fluke, the mindful tasting process during the shutdown of COVID. I decided, let's teach some wine and yoga classes up at the winery when we couldn't teach indoors. And so I would teach one particular class, either yoga or meditation or something of that nature, and then take them through a mindful tasting without calling it that at the time. And I would get such great feedback from people, because what I found is there's a lot of us that are in this gray area, right? And so that is really my message, is that for those of us who are in the gray area, this doesn't apply to someone who has a severe substance abuse problem, right? You're going to need to get professional help to get through that prior to ever considering going on this journey, let's say. But I've had so much feedback from people who are in that gray area, or maybe even have a bigger problem with it than the average bear, that this has been really life-changing. And so I decided to take it more broad with the podcast and with the mindful tasting process. So,
well, your story, I mean, at least your beginning story, I'm not a meditation teacher, so I didn't take that path, but your beginning story is my story too. Just the unconscious habit loop that you mentioned, it's just really becomes very mindless, that you just go home from work, you pour the glass of wine. I mean, without thought. We can do this with food. We can do this with a lot of things. But when I was drinking, that was definitely on a loop, I had my certain triggers and I also started drinking the same, like, as you, as when I was a teenager. It made me more social and less anxious, even though it creates so much anxiety. And I mean, it kills your sleep. There's so many reasons to not be drinking like heavily like that. But in the moment, it made sense. So I really can relate to that part of the story. And I really like your just analogy with, wine tasting and being mindful, because that's really true. I mean, to slow down, smell it, taste it. I'm sure you can talk about, what else you might do in that process, really does bring you back to just full awareness and attention over what you're doing, rather than just like chugging down a glass of wine or chugging a beer because you just got home from work.
Right.
It sounds like it's a really, really different experience.
I think it is. I think a lot of times when even if we're going to an environment to taste or to a party or something where we know there's going to be consumption, oftentimes we're physically present, but we're mentally in our last activity. We're in did I pick up the dry cleanings? Did my daughter get her lunch this morning? Did I finish that? Did I send that email? We're ruminating over the shoulda, coulda, wouldas, the tasks that maybe didn't get checked off the list, the ones that are on the list, all the concerns of the future. And so there's so much going on in our monkey minds, right? That oftentimes when we're consuming, or even when we're just sharing an afternoon with someone and we're not consuming, we're not fully present for the conversation or that which is in our glass or on our plate. And so the first step in my mindful tasting process is to become present. It's called arrive. And by that, fully arrive in the moment. And so the fastest way to get present that I've learned in my life would be through the breath. And so we do, if I'm leading a group, let's say I do this at wineries, I also do it in businesses. If I'm leading a group, I'll typically start with a very deep guided meditation where I take you through a full sensory journey. And that includes quite a bit of breath work. Now, if I'm doing it just myself, let's say if I sit down and I'm going to decide I'm going to have a glass of wine, I will pause, or before I eat, pause. And goes for everything, and just allow myself to arrive. So by taking 5 slower than normal, deeper than normal breath cycles, what we're going to do is drop ourselves from a mobilized state of the sympathetic nervous system, where our digestive system is actually throttled back, to a calm, restful state, where then the digestive organs are starting to get, ready to do their job. They're more prepared, right? Because they're not being suppressed. So after we arrive, then it's a question of asking, what's my intention behind this sip? And I'm holding up, this is a water glass and there's water and some mint in it. But as you pause, again, you're becoming aware. You've already arrived through your breath. So you're much more able to ask this question in that state. And you ask yourself, what's my intention behind the sip? So just that question, when I'm practicing this on my own, oftentimes results in me not having that glass of wine or not having that tub of ice cream. So other times it's just a quick check, like, yeah, I'm just really looking forward to enjoying these flavors. I'm here to celebrate. I'm going to have some time with a loved one. I'm going to really truly enjoy all of the flavors. But a lot of times, the examples we both gave in our past, those would be an unstated, unintentional, there's an intention there, but it was subconscious, right? It was this, I'm going to curb the edge. I'm going to take the edge off my stress. I'm going to take the edge off my anxiety. I'm going to be able to feel better, whatever it might be. I'm going to just, leave it at the office type thing. Whatever that is, it's still an intention, whether you've outwardly stated it. But by the fact of slowing yourself down, asking yourself and getting curious on the response or lack thereof, if there's no response, that's something to get curious about too, right? And then decide how you're going to proceed. And so that's a pretty powerful step that I've heard from feedback from people, has been pretty life-changing. So, and then as we go into the next state, it's going to be admiring. And so by admire, we're going to take a look at the actual contents of what we're going to consume. So in the case of wine, we're going to look at the color, right? We're going to look at the hue, the way the wine falls around the glass. We're going to give it a little swirl. This is specific to wine tasting now, but if we're going to give it a little swirl, because we're allowing then the wine to arrive, just like we did by deepening our breath. If we allow the wine to arrive with a little swirl, we're going to pull oxygen in, and it's going to bring out more of the aromas. It's going to oxidate the wine. And also in that process and in looking at the color, it's just admiring the beauty, just like our plates. I mean, how often do we eat without, just start devouring without, let's look at all the colors. Do I have all the colors on my plate, right? And let's really look at them and admire them. And there's some other things specific to wine tasting with legs, et cetera, that, go into the process. But after that admiration, and part of what we're doing there is we're starting our salivary glands to kick in, right? We're preparing for digestion again. And then the next step is really exploring it. So that's when we get into the smelling. And even with food too, if you smell your food before you eat it, right? Just smelling the different aromas, what does it remind you of? So I go through a process of kind of questioning and pulling out answers, just getting curious. Like, have you ever smelled that before? Because with our sense memory, it's individualized, right? So if I've never smelled, for example, a lychee nut, I'm never going to smell it in a glass of wine. But what we can do is we can sharpen our senses by smelling, right? And so we can actually create more acute um, awareness through all of our senses through practice. But so after we smell it, then we dip into the tasting. And now, so you're probably thinking, if you're listening to this, maybe, oh my God, we're finally going to take a sip, which is funny because sometimes that'll be a challenge for people, right? But there is so much more beauty than in that sip because we've built up this momentum, right? It's just like when you're booking tickets to go to Hawaii or somewhere, right? It's all the anticipation, excitement about getting there. That's what half the fun is, right? And so same thing is with our tastes. We're excited about it. And then as we sip it, we kind of explore the different flavors, again, what it reminds us of, if we like it or not, right? So because I literally did this last night. I was at my mom's house and she had just opened a bottle of wine and it was bad. And I poured it out. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, life is too short to drink bad wine, especially when you're only going to have one glass. And so we're going to open another one because this one is skunked. So,
That's a good idea.
yeah. So then after that exploration piece, and we've kind of sit with the taste and the smells, etc. Then we go into the reflection, and this is where we would look at the savoring step in the wine tasting, what we would call the finish, which is a fancy word for the aftertaste, right? How does it leave the mouth? And you can do this with food too, right? Things that are astringent are going to have that uplift on the sides of the tongue, and they're going to have different properties then for our digestive process. So the other piece of the reflect is really to go on a little gratitude journey. So when I'm teaching this in person, I guide them through it to really bring awareness to all the humans and in the process, right? To get that from the soil to the glass. And so we go on a little gratitude journey and have gratitude maybe who we're with. So again, doing this just on my own, it's going to be as quick as just having, I'm grateful for whoever, maybe it was myself that I prepared it, whatever the gratitude might be, but to really feel into that gratitude too, rather than just spout it out, like feel it viscerally. And then, just continue to enjoy it. So it's a much longer way to take a sip of wine. But I'm telling you, stepping into mindfulness with consumption is one of the most liberating and empowering things we can do for our health.
Yeah, I love this. I mean, we can do this with eating also, and then look at what's on our plate and slow down. And the slowing down part before you sit down and eat is so important to just digesting food. People don't really understand that. Like your digestion starts in your brain. But just for then drinking a glass of wine and slowing down, because I don't know about you, but right, I mean, like my first glass of wine could be gone in a minute, depending on, like what kind of day I was having, or, without no thought, no intention, no attention to it. So I think for people who really don't want to give up drinking, and again, I want to just go back to, I know you said like, this gray area drinking, which I feel like that's the category I definitely fell into, but not everyone is a gray area drinker, and everyone has to really reevaluate or evaluate for themselves where they are with their drinking. But if you don't want to give up drinking, that it's maybe you're drinking too much and but you still don't want to give it up. This mindfulness exercise is a really nice way just to come back to yourself, and just realize why you're drinking in the first place, and just appreciate what's in front of you. It can just be one glass of beautiful wine.
Yeah. And I think too, as for someone who's wanting, let's say if you're just having a typical glass of wine at night or what have you, and you want to explore this process, you might take a few days, or I'd recommend a week off to just reset the palate, because there's something that when we step away from consistency and we allow our taste buds to kind of recalibrate, then it's going to be a much more powerful experience when you step back into it too. So I'd recommend that. And, I think to your point with the digestion, I think a lot of us, I mean, I can just paint you a picture of how I used to eat my lunch. I was at my desk responding to an email, probably from my boss or whoever, and then just eating as I'm responding to an email. So I'm in a state of stress, right? Or oftentimes I'd be standing. How many of us are eating standing up? I mean, these are things that we all do as a culture, at least in the US. And it's really because of how fast the world is, right? And so, again, if we're in this fast, mobilized sympathetic nervous system state, those digestive organs are suppressed because the body thinks that it needs to mobilize. And you don't need to be digesting if you need to run away from something, right? But rather than the saber-toothed tiger today, it's an email, right? And so I think just that, just starting with that awareness of being, okay, what's going on here? Because we don't realize that that impacts our health. And I think, quite frankly, I mean, I don't have any data to support this, but I think that's why the majority of us have IBS, because of not just what we're eating, but how we're eating and our level of unmanaged chronic stress.
Yeah, I don't have data in front of me to support that either, but I think what you're saying makes a ton of sense. I mean, I know that I'm very familiar with that stress eating, and your cortisol levels get high, and then that slows down your digestion. And it definitely leads to a lot of digestive issues and just a whole host of other issues. So slowing down not only with our wine consumption or alcohol consumption, but with our food also, it just makes all the sense in the world. Do you ever have people who say to you, well, then I start to drink like one glass of wine and then I feel like I can't stop? And I guess those people are the ones that have to be really evaluating their wine and alcohol consumption.
Um, so, I think so. I haven't had that feedback on this process in particular. I've actually had the opposite, where I've heard people say, I went to order another glass and I ordered it. And then I took a sip and I realized it didn't even taste close to the first one. So then I just didn't finish the glass, and I never don't finish the glass. Not to say that it's a miracle pill for everybody. It's going to be really individualized. And so, I teach in a outpatient clinic, and a couple of the groups that I teach are in the substance use disorder program, both adults and teens. And I think it's not as much just this during the process as it is, the way I was able to get here is by cultivating daily practices that really supported my well-being. And so practices like daily meditation, movement, etc. And so I think this is something that it's a way to expose people to mindfulness in a way that's an easy step into. But then the reality is, if we've been in a unconscious habit loop for some time, it's going to take more than just one mindful taste to step out of that. But if we come at that with curiosity and compassion, so a big part of everything I teach has to do with self-compassion, because it's the most untaught skill in our culture, right? And it's super important when we're going to make any type of change in life, and when we want to step into more mindfulness, is to have that compassion, because there's going to be times where, oh, you know what, maybe I did eat the ice cream or whatever. I did have a glass and I didn't ask myself what the intention was or what have you, right? So I would just say, the wisdom, the best advice I can give folks listening is the best teacher you have, and the wisdom that you have is actually within you. But in order to access that wisdom, we have to slow down, we have to get still, and we have to get quiet to allow those answers to come through. So that's the majority of my work, is working with people to get to that place of a baseline of inner peace, so that it's with these practices and consistency that we can support and sustain, right? And then we can cultivate a lifestyle that is I also teach 80-20, right? So I'm an 80-20 girl through and through. I mean, the 80% of my lifestyle is very, very consistent around these habits and routines and nutrition and clean and, um, things that the earth created and not a manufacturing plant. But then there's that 20% where you're going to be at a graduation party, or you're going to be, somewhere and maybe not have that control, but you can again go at it with intention. Okay. What's my intention? I'm in this situation. I'm going to have this and not that. Right. I think we just become really constrictive and restrictive with a lot of dietary and consumption programs. And I'm here to suggest that we can liberate ourselves by being more conscious about our consumption so that we don't have to have such a constricted approach. Because over time, what you find is as you step into more of a consciousness-based approach to health, is that these become habits and it becomes a lifestyle where it doesn't feel like, I was at a soccer game this weekend and the mom next to me was eating, eating some chocolate chip cookies out of like a little prepackaged bag, right, from the store. And I was thinking, oh, I'm kind of hungry right now, but my son was in, and when he's in, my adrenaline's pumping, right? And so I know I'm not going to have the best digestion, right? And so I waited until halftime, and then I had a fig, right? I had figs, fresh figs, which are in season right now and amazing, right? And I reflected on that later, like, wow, I didn't even like looking at the cookies over there. It didn't even spark any desire. Like you get to the point where there's just no desire for junk because it makes you feel like junk. But also the awareness of everything that I teach in terms of nutrition too, or this mindfulness process also stems from preparing ourselves to digest. It's the thing that we all forget about. So we have this concept of Agni in Ayurveda, which is our digestive fire, right? And that's not just true of what we drink and eat, but it's also our emotions that need to be metabolized and assimilated. And so, yeah, it's all kind of it's all the same thing. It's whatever we're consuming, whether it be social media, whether it be the news, whether it be a stress or a trauma experience, or whether it be food or drink.
Well, those are really great points. And I think that the takeaway is that you said, like, the wisdom really is within you first. And the compassion. I mean, I know when I stopped drinking, there's no way I could have done it without having self-compassion. I wouldn't have worked. There's no way. And all you're like saying that, like it's not just the food and the drinking, but our other consumptions. I think the takeaway is we have a lot to learn in this country, right? About just getting mindful and getting still and getting calm.
Yeah.
And it would be a nice goal to have everyone achieve. And hopefully more as time goes on and with like work like you're doing, that people can see that. And Maria, you sound like you're just doing amazing work. And I just love everything that you're doing. So, and I'm so intrigued with this mindful drinking. And I think my listeners definitely will as well. How can people find you? I mean, how can people work with you? Can people, I know that you're in California, I'm in Connecticut. I mean, people listen all over the country and world, but can people get in touch with you and work with you?
Yeah. So my website address is Take Five. So my business is called Take Five, take and then the number five. Just to remind you that all it takes is 5 breaths, right? If you're in, and I'll just kind of leave with that too. It's if you cannot take 5 minutes for yourself, you can at least take 5 breaths, slower than normal, deeper than normal, because that's going to do wonders for your health. So take5.health is the domain. So rather than .com. And I'm on the social platforms as at Take Five Health, no dot there. And so, yeah, I work, I've got a mentorship program going on right now. It's an 8-week program called Empower Your Health, and it's a group mentorship. So it combines the best of these different teachings along with some group coaching. It's very powerful. So the next cohort will probably start in late October, and there will be an online option as well for a self-paced course. And then I work one-on-one with people. So with one-on-one work, that's where we can really kind of dive deep. And I also provide as a support to my one-on-one, to my mentorship, and to my workplace clients, because I teach this in the workplace as well, especially as holiday season's coming up and these holiday parties are on the heels. And if you think all you have to do is think back to that one Christmas party for work where, so-and-so, or maybe you and yourself got plastered and made a, fool of themselves. to remember that a lot of times, in the workplace, our parties aren't so mindful. So I actually teach this as part of a stress reduction and mindful tasting process for companies. So those, you can reach out to me for all those things. And I also have an online studio that has over 100 different guided 5-minute video and audios that are designed to be done during your workday, to just tap out from the to-do list, tap out from all the productivity, all the going, doing, to take 5 minutes to return to ourselves, to ground, to breathe, and to stretch. And so that's something I offer for businesses as well as individuals. So yeah, that's all at my website.
Fantastic. Well, I will put all of those links in the show notes so people can find you that way as well, in case they didn't write that down, and they can easily access your services. So, Maria, thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. I really learned a lot from you, and I know that my listeners will too. So thanks
Thank you so
again.
much. Yeah, thank you so much, Heather. I appreciate it.
And as always, if you loved this podcast, please consider gifting me with a 5-star review. It is so helpful for me to get the word out on real eating, our real bodies, and real food stories. Thank you so much and have a great week. Bye for now.